Shalom, shalom. This is our Speak Up, episode 16, Finding Joy in the Torah. So blessed to have the opportunity to speak to Mark, share some awesome insights on his story, and some much needed perspective as well on the inner dimensions of the Torah and the protection that we need from outside forces and sources trying to lead us away from our innermost goodness. There we go.
Rabbi!
How's
How's it
You
going?
can call me Reb. Reb means Mister. I don't know who this rabbi is, but I'm doing good. This is episode 16 of Speak Up for Yisrael. I recommend for anyone who missed any other episodes, you can catch up on the YouTube. We feature Torah educators, public speakers, Torah ambassadors, influencers, counter-missionary experts, all here to share insights to safeguard the heritage. Some interesting notions of safeguarding heritage is first and foremost to learn what that even is before perhaps peeking into different vineyards. As far as Judaism is concerned, being someone familiar with the inner dimensions, so infinitely deep. Why go anywhere else when your own garden is so rich? But I love to, and I'm so inspired to learn and connect to someone like yourself further, given the journey you're on. So please, I'd love to hear another introduction from yourself. I've heard it before and been connecting to your content as well. Love your music. For those that don't know, I'm a rapper myself, so, you know, fire recognize fire. So please share a little bit about yourself and who you are and where you're coming from.
Cool. Well, appreciate you, Reb. My name is Mark, D-Mark Gene officially. Coming from, I was born in New York. My parents are Haitians. They come from the island of Haiti. They migrated to New York for a better life. And that was like 30 years ago. They were in a band together. And, they met and got married, and here I am after my sister and brother, of course. But yeah, long story short, as I got older, my mother's rule for me to stay in her house, this was probably 8, 9 years ago, was I had to go to some kind of religious organization and I had to go to college for me to be in her under her roof. And even with those two conditions, I had to move out at 26. So that led me to reading my Bible and being a person. I mean, yeah, I was kind of hit or miss, Yeah, I still went to church on Sundays, but I would be holy on sometimes and heathen other times. And eventually, all of that came together for me to start taking the Tanakh more seriously. So, the Christian Bible at the time, but ultimately the Tanakh. And long story short, as I started reading more, I decided to get more and more serious about what I was reading. And eventually I decided, you know what? It's better to not be living such a heathenistic lifestyle and take a wife and, be like the guys I read in the Tanakh. And eventually that led to me getting married, and we're studying every day, and eventually leaving Christianity. And here I am in front of you guys and you, Reb. So, yeah.
Very cool story, and it sounds like the story is just starting.
Yes, sir. It really
And
is.
I'm right there with you. For those that don't know, I've only been growing these bad boys for 3.5
Nice.
years. I grew up totally secular, and I'm a Baal Tshuva of just over 5 years. So it's also a new journey, to say the least. So thank you for sharing. So I'd love to hear if was there a particular hashgacha pratit, this like a story of divine providence? Was there that aha moment that inspired you to leave Christianity and to pursue Judaism?
Yeah. Um, Funny story. I was as I was studying, after I got married, me and my wife, we started reading the Tanakh every day. Okay, so the way the Christian Bible is set up, you have the Tanakh, of course, the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim, and then you have this extra book added on at the end called the New Testament. So what we would do is we would read a portion of the Torah, a portion of the prophets, a portion of the writings, and then a portion of the New Testament. And that was just entirely too much. It would take like 2 hours every morning. So what we started doing for like a year and a half was we would just read the Torah and then the prophets. And then after we finished the prophets, we would read the Torah and the Ketuvim. Truth be told, we never actually made it to the New Testament, okay? Never made it to the New Testament. So long story short, as we were studying, my wife and I would post on Twitter every day, something that we would learn. It was like a journal for me, I would post it and some people would respond and we would engage and we would talk about it. So one guy, he's not even Jewish. I don't even know what happened to this guy, honestly. But one day, I posted something about there being multiple gods because that's how it is in Christianity. And he just took me to task. He was like, no, it's not like this. And if this was the case, then why does it say this here in Isaiah? And how long are you going to keep dancing around these scriptures? So I was like, what is this guy talking about? He's so bold. He's so aggressive, dog. What are you talking about? Chill out. Just calm down, right? So I looked at what he said and it said, I made heavens by myself, no one else. I was like, wow, I never seen this before. Like, it's been here the whole time. I'm just like completely wrong, right? So I finally changed my perspective. Okay, the Tanakh said there's only one God, so there's only one God. And mind you, this whole time I haven't read the New Testament, so my mind's not polluted by those ideas. So, okay, that's where it's all started. Then, as I continued to study that, I started learning lots of other different things that the New Testament would say. For example, it says that, okay, Jesus came and died for everybody's sin. The Torah expressly says, without any question or hesitation or movement, that a father cannot die for the sins of a son, and the son cannot die for the sins of a father. Every man shall die for his own sin. And it went back and repeated the same sentiment in the prophet Ezekiel. So my pastor at the time caught wind of this, and he was livid, okay? Like, he was not happy about it. So he called me up and he argued on the phone with me about it. And I'm like, man, if there's more than one God, why is he saying this? I was actually talking to a guy about this yesterday, and he still can't answer it. Nobody can answer the question. I'm like, if there's more than one God, why does God say, I'm God, me by myself, there's no one else? Like, if there's somebody else with him, he's lying right here. Nobody can answer the question. Eventually, my pastor got tired of me having this attitude, and he said, "You know what? You're not welcome back here. You're
Wow.
not welcome to this church." I was devastated. I was sad. I was like, "Wow, this sucks." Me and my wife are like, "Oh, we've been there for years.
Right.
We grew up there." So ultimately, we just kind of stayed for a little bit, and we just kept reading. We realized, okay, something's going on here. And we decided, okay, maybe Christianity is not for us. Let's try the next best thing, Messianic Judaism.
Hmm.
Lo and behold, we go there, and we're learning these things. And actually, that was a defining moment when we left Christianity, because we went up, and they had these aliyahs that you would do, and I went up for an aliyah, and I read out the prophet Ezekiel, and he said something, which was he said, how long will you disobey me to the effect? But he says, if you live by my statutes or my laws, if the man who does my statutes or my laws will live by them, because people were dying and they were getting, chastised. So I was like, man, they have this same verse in the New Testament. So I went back and I read it. And it was like the exact opposite thing. He was like, what? Why are you keeping the Torah? If you live by the law, if you do the Torah, you'll live by it. That's not faith at all. I was like, what in the world? This is the exact same words, but the exact opposite sense. So I was like, man, is this guy Paul a false prophet, a false apostle? So, I get on Rabbi Google and I'm like, is Paul a false apostle or Paul? You know what I'm saying? And come to find out, there was Tovia Singer breaking down how this guy's just complete sham, and me and my wife are just blown away, and we're just not believing Tovia Singer. No, you're a liar. I don't believe you, right? I want to see it for myself. So we open up the Tanakh, and this right here, this is when the hammer hit the gavel. Everything else was true that Rabbi Tovia Singer said, but I was like, well, Jesus is still the Messiah, right? So I wanted to look up from the Tanakh what a Messiah was. The word is in the Tanakh 39 times. The first time is in Leviticus with the priest Aaron. And every single time, two things happened. One, the Mashiach was anointed with oil in the Tanakh. And two, whatever he was anointed for, whether he was a priest or a king, he was actually a priest or a king while he was alive. After I saw this, I was like, man, this guy was never anointed, number one, and he was never a king while he was alive. Two, he's not the Mashiach. I threw it all out, and here I am. The rest is history.
Wow. Amazing. I think most of us know, but for those that might not, that Judaism doesn't see converts. It's hard to be Jewish. we know the responsibility, and perhaps like a basic insight Kabbalistically on why it is so hard to become Jewish for even those that want to take the journey, is that when someone officially converts and there's this shift and they become a new spiritual entity in regards to their energy and their soul structure. So now they have all these different channels of opportunity to connect to Hashem, and therefore channels of responsibility, being the Torah and the mitzvot. So if that individual, God forbid, went back to their old ways, or even worse, their idolatrous ways, so then in essence you would be corrupting the entire system of channels that are now open with responsibility given the new person's new status. Rather, as opposed to that, it would have been better if the person had stayed in that prior state. Just to give some maybe deeper perspective as to why we have such a process. But unlike other Abrahamic faiths, there is no forcing or seeking or encouraging of conversion. And it's a very interesting principle to consider, as we have a principle in the Kabbalistic tradition that Rabbi Ashlag spoke about quite a bit in his essays. There's no forcing in spirituality. If anything is done with coercion or force, then there is a hint that it's coming from some type of negative aspect, some type of negative consciousness. Rather, the free will and the desire of the heart to truly pursue and place one's heart, soul, and resource to be able to serve the Creator, that's the ideal, and that should be independent of any type of forcing or pushing. So can you share a little bit of your challenges as you're still on the journey to Judaism, and maybe some things that you've been facing along the way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Most recently, okay, so October 7th happened, and that was just a nightmare. But of course, here I am, with God and His people. So it really hit me hard, and I think my boy DJ Kraz sent me something. It was like a Shabbat for Israel or something like this, and it was like, we're all just gonna be Shomer Shabbos as much as possible. And I was like, you know what? I think I want to do that. You know what I'm saying? Because up until this point, I've been driving the show on every Shabbat. So I stayed home that week, and like after I stayed home that week, I was like, wow, that was amazing. I kind of want to do this every week, right? But I was like, wow, sure, so far if I walk, it's like 3 hours. I'm in a conundrum here, right? So, and of course, I work, and I work the night shift, and I get one night off every week. I get Friday night off. At that point in time, I get Friday night off every week. So some Saturday nights, before Havdalah, I'd have to go into work. So it was like, wow, that was amazing. But I was having these, it was like I was having these grievances because it's like, wow, I know what Shomer Shabbos is supposed to be, and I know I'm not that. So, I talked to God about it, and just kind of just went on about my way. Like I really wanted to, figure out something, but I had contracts that had to be finished out, and it just didn't seem possible at the moment. So here comes God with a bit of a nightmare, which is really a blessing in disguise. And first off, my apartment complex catches on fire. Like the whole unit, like not my building, but the whole building just catches on fire. Like the guy at the end, I guess he's frying fish or something like this, and the whole building just goes up in smoke, flames, and the smoke damages the entire row of apartments. So the landlord calls me and she says, "Hey man, I got bad news for you." And I'm like, "All right, what's up? What's the bad news? Hit me." And she's like, yeah, well, you've got to, I know this is short notice, but, we've got to get you out of the apartment. The fire marshal says, the place is unfit to live, and we've got to get you a new place. We've got these other options that you can move into, and we've got some people that'll help you move. But I mean, as quickly as you can move, you've got to go. And I was like, all right, well, all right, I'll talk to my wife, and then I'll let you know something. So I hang up, and me and my wife are talking, and she's like, well, we've been wanting to move closer to the synagogue, and fortunately for me, like there's this one place, it's got sidewalks all the way to the synagogue because we're not in a big city. But I called them and I was like, hey, by the way, I'm doing a Dave Ramsey program, so I don't have credit cards, so I don't have credit or anything like that. So I called the people up and I'm like, hey, I see your requirements are you need to have like credit and it's got to be this certain score. And I'm like, I don't have any of that, but I've got a good job and I got money that I can pay you. And they're like, we'll see what we can do. So they call me back a few days later and like, nope, you're in here. And I was like, yes, right. So cool, great thing. I'm like, yes, now we can walk the shore. No more driving on shore.
When I finally came to the decision that I had to transform my life and get out of just the vortex of anxiety and lack of self-actualization and self-development and just not fulfilling any aspect of my potential or purpose, and finally scream out from the depths of my heart for Hashem to just open the door and make it easy. Like, Hashem, I don't know where, I don't know what, I just know I want it, I know it's true, just give it to me on a silver platter, I'm there for you. And I was crying like that, requesting that for 2-3 hours a day, literally golf ball sized tears for 2 weeks straight. And I found myself in a month with my prayers answered in a very explicit, unquestionable way. Full ride, plane ticket to yeshiva, 3 meals a day, nice apartment, learning 10 plus hours a day. Literally exactly what I asked for. I said, I want it, give it all to me, I'm ready, I want to dive in. That's literally what I got to the nth degree. So that was a biggie, among many other miracle stories, but that's one that comes to mind. And I myself, before making that jump and finally coming to yeshiva, I had a 5-year stint in the New Age community. I mean, anything and everything that was going on, the Chicagoland yoga events, ecstatic dance events, dealing with yoga, chakras, energy, you name it, I was into it.
Gotcha.
So, I dipped my feet into a lot of different spiritualities and different religions just to kind of cover my bases and get perspective. So, for whatever reason, I never felt called or pulled to dive in as deep as I did with Judaism and Kabbalah, because I was even learning it in a very kind of universalist, watered down way, even throughout my years and my upbringing, interestingly enough. So, I always felt this distinction. And, today, being where I am and seeing the challenges of the generation in a general sense, let's say, with just mental health, distractions, technology, media, war, whatever the case is, but also in a spiritual warfare type of way in regards to what's happening with the campaign of missionaries and infiltration and attempts to, bring Jews in essence away from Judaism and away from the oneness of the Creator. So I'm curious, how do you understand this campaign, which seems to be stronger and greater fuel than ever before to try to bring us away from our own sweet vineyards and kind of graze into territory unknown and perhaps destructive? What's your experience or knowledge of this situation?
Okay, so let me make sure I understand the question of about missionaries being intentional on trying to pull Jews away from Judaism.
Yeah.
I think that's heavily rooted in the Christian's Bible. Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you why. There's one verse that comes to mind. I studied this book, so I'm very familiar with it. says something to the effect of go and make disciples of all the nations. And that's one reason why they're so aggressive, and not just Jews, but all mankind, but specifically Jews. There's another verse that says, "To the Jew first, and to the Gentile." And the guy, Apostle Paul, vehement liar. This guy lies through his teeth. Everything this man says is a lie. Can't tell the Christian that because they can't see it, but everything this guy says is a lie. But one of the lies he said is effective to the Jew first, to the Gentile. And I become as a Jew to the Jews. And one under the law to those under the law, one as one not under the law to those not under the law. So effectively, the Christian strategy is they if they can't get you by saying Jesus, they change it to Yeshua. If they can't get you by saying the Gospels or the New Covenant, they say the Brit Chadasha or something like this. So their strategy now is to instead of it being Christianity, it's Messianic Judaism. So that way, and this is not for the informed. I was telling my wife this. This is not for the Jew who knows Gemara. This is not for the Jew who knows Tanakh. This is not for the Jew who's informed. This is for the unsuspecting Jew who doesn't know left from right, up from down. This is who they target. And as a matter of fact, there was a lady that I knew while I spent a little bit of time at the Messianic Church, and she was telling me, she was Jewish, she grew up from birth, both of her parents were Jewish, but what she had was she had a nanny from like the Bahamas or something like this. And I heard Rabbi Yosef Mizrahi comment on this. She had like a nanny from the Bahamas, and she would listen to like Christian programs and things like this growing up. So yeah, she grew up in a Jewish household. She had a frum husband or whatever the case was. But after they got divorced, she remembered what this lady was saying and teaching to her, and eventually she went for a hook, line, and sinker. Apparently, this lady herself, she wasn't well versed, so she was just the easiest target. The easiest target. And the thing about it is, and this is why it's so slick. This is why it's so deceptive. Because if a person doesn't know what the Tanakh has to say, they don't know what a Mashiach is, for number one. So when Paul comes saying, "Oh, the Mashiach is here, he's here, look at this guy, the Mashiach," they don't know left from right. So they say, "Oh, he's here, yes, he's here, I believe him, yeah, he's here," right? Because they don't know. Paul would say something like, "Oh, what do you mean? There's no Jew or Gentile. Everybody's one in Christ. Oh, what do you mean the Torah? You don't have to keep the Torah. You're free under the law." You hear that, and if you don't know anybody, it sounds so good. You don't have to. What, y'all? Just the Old Testament. It's old. I don't have to do it. But to the person who knows, he remembers that God says, "Hey, this is my covenant forever." I think he said that in Chronicles. We're supposed to keep the Torah forever. Or when he spoke to Abraham Avinu in I think it is Bereshit, Genesis chapter 17, he says, "This is to you and to your descendants for an everlasting generation." Like it's continual. And then he adds a caveat, and this is why Paul is so slimy. I despise this book. I hate it. This is why he's so slimy. Okay, so it says. Okay, the Tanakh says in Genesis, it says, "The covenant is to you and to your children. And those who don't follow the covenant, those who don't circumcise their son." And then, look, here's the catcher. It says, "To those who are born of you, and also to those who you purchase." And then it goes on to say, "If they don't circumcise themselves, they'll be cut off and separated from their people." All right? This is a very clear statement. Paul goes in and he tells these Christians, and I hate this, it's so bad, but he tells these Christians, he says, "Well, if you're Christ, you're seeds of Abraham. And if you're a seed of Abraham through Christ, you don't have to be circumcised." So you're telling me if you're Christ, you're the seed of Abraham. And if you're the seed of Abraham because you're Christ, you don't have to be circumcised. That's a huge contradiction. God just got them saying if you're Abraham's seed, whether you're bought or whether you're born, you have to be circumcised. If not, you'll be separated from the people. It's so slimy. I hate
I appreciate you feeling comfortable to express yourself, and glad I can hold that space for you. It's all good.
I appreciate it.
Can I share some thoughts on that?
Yeah, please.
To your point of the uneducated or the unsuspecting, I just want to speak spiritually in terms of the protection, the energy that connecting to Torah provides us. And that's why this campaign is not going out to communities that might look like myself, because there is this great guarding of the wealth of knowledge and wisdom and the consistency of it, in contrast to what you have just described.
Mm.
And so this is why I challenge anyone to consider, first and foremost, to dive deep into the sweet infinite depths of your own backyard before considering strange vineyards.
Mm-hmm.
And something to consider as well is that, we have 4 different levels of Torah interpretation. We have the pardes, the orchard, so to speak. We have pshat, the simple. We have remez, the hint. We have drush, the metaphoric. And we have sod, the secret. And the secret in general is described as the Kabbalistic interpretation, the deepest interpretation. And the Kabbalists describe a language called root and branch, meaning, yes, there is the actual story of the Tanakh and the history of all of our forefathers until today. And then there's also a way to interpret and understand that story within us in a psychological way, in that those words are codes for also the inner processes of our consciousness of our day-to-day. We all go through our inner floods, our inner imprisonment in Egypt, our inner exiles, and therefore also redemptions, and so forth. It's interesting to consider that there is this consistent and unbroken tradition of the language of root and branch, and in this generation, very heavily open and revealed for those that wish to learn. And in contrast to that, the, let's say, missionary camps and the like have taken their own approach of root and branch and saying, well, this word and this word and this word and this word and that's all talking about our guy, which is baseless other than fitting their own, intentions and, desires to bring people to this image as opposed to the one and only. And my challenge would be is that by definition, that baseless tradition and claim is as such, meaning there is an exacting understanding from, arguably, as far as the tradition is concerned, Moses until now, of this type of language, of what this word means and that word means in the innermost depths. And yet there is an attempt to interpret scripture without any of that, without any basis, and therefore come to these conclusions that, to your point of what you've expressed, are totally inconsistent and out of line and contradictory to the actual word of the Creator.
Mm-hmm.
So when we consider this unbroken tradition, we and those who are connected to it and see its depths, then there is a great value in challenging others to consider, before one makes such a claim, let's actually learn the language and understand what's happening at those different levels. And therefore, to come to the conclusion, for example, that this individual was the Messiah, Mashiach, when Kabbalistically, Mashiach is a code word. Yes, there is eventually, at the end of time, with the third temple and the king and all those processes. Absolutely. That's part of our tradition. But also it's the level of consciousness. It's connected to the highest aspect of the soul, of Or Yechidah, spoken a lot about in the books of Chassidut and Kabbalah, that there is this spark of our greatest or highest self, so to speak, where we have unconditional love for the other, both as individuals and as a collective. And this idea, this consciousness, is called Mashiach in a general way. If enough of the Jewish people do tshuva and return and align and come back to the Creator and His Torah and the mitzvot, let's say, just throwing out a number because 20% of the Jews left Egypt, let's say 20% of Jews reached the state of consciousness, then that is the foundational means, according to Rav Ashlag and Rabbi Nachman and the like, that the Mashiach can come. So my challenge in a general spiritual way was, before anyone can make such a claim of anyone, first and foremost, we have to do that inner work right here, right now, to build that inner temple, to build that inner unconditional love, and to have that refinement process through the system of Torah and the mitzvot before any type of claim of any one individual.
Right. Yeah, right. That's beautiful. No, you know what? There's I think there's also a verse, if the whole if the house of Israel returns, I think that's in Deuteronomy 30 at the beginning of the chapter, like somewhere between verses 1 and 7 or something like this. It says that, if my people, if they'll repent after all these things and after they've gone astray, it says, then I'll return them back to Israel. And I don't have my chumash with me, but it's somewhere between Deuteronomy 1:30 verses 1 and 7, where he says the same thing. If enough people will repent and return, then he'll bring them back into the land. Then, he'll usher things in how they were before. But there's actually a verse literally talking about that, like in the Torah, like literally in the Torah, not in the Tanakh, in the Torah. Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go.
So yeah. So okay. So some of these claims. Okay. So what was most important to you was, to really, before anybody else can make those claims to you, for you to, to get rooted in Torah and mitzvos for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. See, that I'm of the opinion that is probably the number one defense to the Christian missionary claim, because, and this is what I think. I mean, Rabbi Tovia Singer might say something different, but what I think it is when you're performing mitzvot, you have enough ground knowledge of who God is and how He behaves to notice something's wrong. Okay, there's a story Rabbi Tovia Singer says, and I never forgot it. It goes to the effect of, he met somebody who was a counterfeit money expert or something like this, where their job was to notice fake money. And he was like, wow, I bet you spend a lot of time looking at all the fakes so you can identify them. Yeah. So he said, no, that's not what I do at all. What he does is he gets extremely familiar with the real deal. The real dollar bill. It's got certain markings, certain insignias. When you hold it up to the light, it does a certain thing, all the details. And he says, when you're so familiar with the real deal, you can spot a fake from a mile away. So when a person's like practicing mitzvahs and they're like practicing what the Torah has to say, it's like a built-in defense mechanism for these imposters, man, these fakers. That's what they're fake. It's a fake old thing. Yeah.
It's a protection. And, I'll say that it's an interesting dynamic, because I've spoken with a lot of people who have also been born and raised in a Jewish community and then had their challenges in terms of dryness or making claims of its archaic nature and then leaving. And I've spoken to many who have done that process and then specifically came back out of inspiration by seeing just how deep and consistent and scientific that the deep depths, let's say, of the inner tradition can be. So it's interesting to consider that, yes, the Torah and the Mitzvot in a general way and its observance is a protection.
Mm-hmm.
And I would challenge that also in this generation to enforce that protection all the more so, because we are in the generation of the greatest darkness, as Reb Adam has said poetically. That's why we also need the greatest lights. And the greatest lights and the most potent light that there is in this generation are these deeper teachings of, let's say, Chassidut and Kabbalah and the like. So that would be my challenge, but I don't think it's a shock for anyone given my content. To find joy in the Torah, as this is, it's what this talk is called, is joy in the Torah. To be able to learn the actual methodology, the mindfulness, the mindsets, the way to have the framework to step in and in a meditative way experience the bliss and the joy that is within every word. Not to say that this is a constancy that can be experienced in every moment of every word that we learn, but it is something that we can regulate, and it's certainly something Hashem wants, because He'd much rather us enjoy the bliss and the joy that is within the deep depths of what He has provided us as a blueprint to reach our greatest actualization, as opposed to eating a burger and scrolling endlessly on Instagram. Rather have these higher level desires and fulfillments as far as joy is concerned, speaking from experience, as I've been around the block a couple of times, so to speak. What's your experience with your joy in the Torah? How do you what's your experience energetically, personally, with your learning now as you continue in this journey towards Judaism relative to your experience prior?
I honestly would have to say, I think the biggest joy gained from the Torah, I mean, obviously, is the knowledge. It's like, of course, okay, we come from Philly, very, secular background for lack of a better term. And everything I learned growing up was the exact opposite of what the Torah says. So I think the biggest joy from the Torah is knowledge of how to live that life and succeed at living. Because a lot of people are living, they're not living well. But because we have the Torah, we have, for example, we have a beautiful family life. How can you not? Every Shabbat, you take 25 hours, you're spending time with wife and kids. You have obligations to your wife. I know of a few people who, if they would have known the obligations a man has to his wife, probably still would be married. I know some people, if they would have had Shabbat, 25 hours at home with their family, they would have had better kids and better marriage. I got lucky. God gave me enough sense to smack me in the head, and I listened, and I listened, and it worked out for me. So that is probably one of the biggest joys. I mean, yeah, there's lots of other things. You get to serve lots more people, you get to connect, you get to travel and go to different places. But I mean, after Torah, the most important thing, after God, the most important thing is family, and that right there. Yeah, I think probably nobody should get. I heard Rabbi Yosef Mizrahi say this. I don't think anybody should get married or start a family unless they're willing to be, Torah observant. Unless they're willing, because it came from God. You got to go to God to know how it works. You don't got God, it's probably not gonna work.
Well
I
said.
mean, it might get, but yeah.
I mean, not to scare anyone, I think we all are pretty familiar with statistics. And this isn't to say that there aren't challenges in relationships and marriages in the religious community. But for what it's worth, to consider the divorce rate being 50+% in secular society versus closer to 10% in the Orthodox community,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to say there. And certainly, I think there's plenty of opportunity for a greater development of our mental and emotional faculties and the development of that in the community in a general way, especially when it comes to relationships, myself included. But just to gauge that for what it is worth on the surface level, that there is a deep depth to that statistic and the consistency that can be brought as far as family life is concerned through the Torah and the mitzvah,
Absolutely,
as we see.
absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Sometimes I kind of wish, like, to the conversation I could add, like, more of the deep, mystical, Kabbalistic things. But, everybody's a specialist at something. So, that's your department.
That's why I'm here. Well, to lead more into the joy, and maybe you already answered this question with your experience, but what does bring you the most joy in your life, and how does it connect to Torah?
What brings me the most joy in life? Honestly, not exactly family or work or music or anything, but how do you say this? Avodat Hashem, serving God.
Yeah.
we're here, Israel specifically is here to be Hashem's servant. He explicitly said that in Isaiah. He said, I fashioned you to be my servant. Granted, I haven't finished my Geras yet, but knowing that there's a purpose there, there's an agenda, there's something, there's a reason, that not only gives me joy, but purpose and focus. So I enjoy that a lot. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I was about to say, what's your answer to the question? That's a good question, What's your response?
What brings me the most joy? Yeah. Connection with the Creator. And the framework that, in essence, every single second of our lives is, in essence, an opportunity to do just that. To appreciate this spark that is the soul, the Chelek Elokai Mimal, the portion of the Creator on high, that is within people, all the more so my better half, my son, my family in general, my friends, my community, my Rebbe, my followers, everyone, the whole world, just to appreciate and have the reverence and the respect, to have the framework and the conscientiousness and awareness that each and every one of us at the deepest level is oh so special, and that there's a reason that this mitzvot are split into Ben Adam Lachavero and Ben Adam Lamakom, between man and his friend, his neighbor, and between man and his Creator. And Hashem wants us to focus on our interpersonal relationships. Interestingly enough, not to say that the other one shouldn't be included. Obviously, we should serve Hashem and do those things like put on tefillin and whatnot as an example. The reason why, as I've heard it and read it from the Baal HaSulam, Rabbi Ashlag of blessed memory, is we get feedback from people. I'm not necessarily getting a call from God at the end of the day like, bro, your shachrit was awesome.
Yeah.
Good job. I don't know. Maybe I felt great and super connected, but my intention was actually off and egoistic. Maybe that time that I felt like it was an egoistic expression, I was actually serving myself with helping someone. Maybe I was going against my inner desire, and it was actually considered to be a wonderful expression of holiness. Hard to say. I think to tap into that innermost goodness of the other and to appreciate their grandeur, and therefore to experientially, like, whoa, I mean, how pleasurable it is to serve someone important, right? I mean, how many people would pay money to just carry the luggage of their favorite celebrity or idol? Like, no, let me pay you $1,000 to carry your luggage, please. I just want to follow you around. How much more so should it be the case, not for an idol or a celebrity, God forbid, but to serve the King of all kings? So for us to expand ourselves and to appreciate the moment to moment, the minutia, to have a big desire to serve, but treat every crumb, every little drop of experience as infinite. This is called the general correction of creation. This is in contrast to big lights in a small vessel, that I just want to get drunk off the pleasures of the world, or even drunk off the pleasures of spirituality, but I don't have such a means to really receive it in a proper, aligned way. And that breaks us. And that's what broke us many times in the story of the Tanakh, this shattering, this shira. So the correction of that are small lights with a big vessel. But we have the freedom, we have the emunah, we can have the faith to treat and have the reverence for the little things that we do, and to appreciate that it's not so little. Even little things are huge and moving mountains, and it's so important. We have such a wonderful responsibility to try to employ the love and the care and the compassion for the other, and also, as we've spoken about, the great need to have the healthy boundary and stay safe and to be protected from an influence that would remove us or distract us and bring us away from serving the one and only Creator.
Emphasis on the one and only.
Yes. So, as being, we want to be ambassadors for the one and only. That's kind of our co-creatorship. This is our partnership in creation. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on why do you think the world is so obsessed with Jews and Israel?
Why is the world so obsessed with Jews and Israel? It's
Jews
because
and Israel. I mean, yeah. Doesn't
it's
have
the
to be Israel
gefilte
necessarily.
fish. It's definitely gefilte fish. All right, all jokes aside, all jokes aside. I do believe it is for two reasons. The first reason is because God said to Abraham, I think I might be butchering this quote, but it's because in your descendants all the nations shall be blessed. So I think everybody's obsessed with Israel and the Jews. For the first reason is because that's where they get their blessings from, apparently, or some kind of blessing, because that's what the Tanakh said. And that's my first reason. Because how are you going to get the blessings if this is the way you're supposed to get it? You have to be focused on these people somehow, in some way, shape, or form. So either you're going to love them or hate them, but you've got to be aware of them. And the second reason I think is honestly because of Christianity, because despite the negative parts of Christianity, God still runs the world, and He decided to spread it out all over the earth for a reason. Maybe part of that reason is to make the whole world. I heard one person say that because God spread out Islam and Christianity, and I think he was saying, my rabbi was saying, I think Maimonides said this, is that the world is more prepared for Mashiach to come. They're more ready to accept the idea of there only being one God. They're more receptive to the things that are in the Torah. So yeah, why the world is so obsessed? Number one is the filthy fish, but also because Abraham, God's promise to Abraham was that all the nations shall be blessed through them, and also because since Christianity was so spread out, and we got Jesus and all these different guys, they're Jews are very brought to the front. They're very in people's mind because they hear about him, and every Sunday they go to church. Oh, Jesus, he was a Jew. Every weekend, there's always something or somebody's talking about something related to the Jewish people.
It's a kind of a difficult and a bitter point. It's brought in the Talmud in Masechet Sanhedrin, 97b, if I'm not mistaken, that if the Jewish people don't do tshuva, they don't realign, come to Torah and the mitzvot, and so forth, then the Creator will appoint a king as wicked as Haman to get them to do the tshuva. So either way, we're getting to the final goal. All will be well. Choice is, do we want to choose the path of light and through free will and our own accord and our own desire to achieve that goodness for all? Or will we choose otherwise and therefore be pushed from the back through pains and sufferings and the like, as we've experienced so many times through all of history, in order to kind of push us or force us to do that inner work? So the same way, to your point of, there's this notion of blessing, the source of blessing for the nations. So we've also been given this responsibility, not in that we are greater or more important, rather we have a responsibility because we received the Torah. And so to be ambassadors and to share the Torah without any intention to make anyone convert, because you can have a non-Jew follow Judaism as a Noahide. There's no need to convert to follow Hashem. So it's an interesting thing to consider that, and this is my this is my challenge spiritually, is that because we are supposed to be at our greatest actualization, a mamlechet kohanim, a nation of priests, and the priests didn't have a portion of their own in the land because God was their portion, so to speak. They worked and did the service in the holy temple, and they were the teachers. They were the rabbis. They were the ones who brought forth the great wisdom. Kabbalistically, the priests are also connected to the aspect of loving kindness, and that aspect of loving kindness of chesed has a parameter where it's connected to the crown itself of Keter, which principle is the desire to give goodness to creation. And so for us to share this notion of the Creator's desires to give goodness to creation, meaning the one and only source of all, that is beyond all image and comprehension, wants to provide us this goodness. And we refine ourselves to the Torah and the Mitzvot in order to be able to receive that goodness. So it could be on an unconscious level, though they might not be cognizant of themselves because it's something programmed within the soul, that the hatred or obsession or even anti-Semitism and the like is also coming from a place of, you guys need to be doing your jobs. I want you guys to learn your stuff so you can eventually teach us as fitting. You're supposed to be a nation of priests. You're supposed to have God as your portion, and therefore learn the wisdom in order to teach it out to the world and be an or lagoyim, a light to the nations. So until we're doing that, we will be reminded and pushed from the back, so to speak, until we can take that role and not only learn and involve ourselves in the wisdom and the refinement process of the Torah and the Mitzvot and the Halach and the like, but also to step into that responsibility as being a big brother, so to speak, being a leader and sharing that for all, because all the nations and all of the Tzelem Elokim, all of the people of the world made in the image of God are to receive the peace and the light and the goodness of the ultimate future.
Yes, that's powerful. That's deep. Now, one idea you said that really connected with me, that I really connected with is, the Kohanim didn't have their own land, and for a long time Israel didn't have their own land, but it's still a nation of priests. So that I think those two ideas connect very well considering the history.
Yes. Well said.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And perhaps in maybe a closing idea to that point, we have this notion that the physical reality is an expression of the inner reality. The olam is spiegel, as the Baal Shem Tov says. Spiegel is marah. It's a mirror in Yiddish. So what I'd like to posit is, if so many people are expressing that the Jews don't deserve their own land and don't deserve to be in Israel or don't need to be in Israel, so Israel splits it in two words, Yeshar and the holy name of God, which I'll pronounce as Kale. So straight to God, meaning alignment in thoughts, speech, and action. Aligned to be able to serve with unconditional love and goodness and compassion, healthy boundary, and all ways of Torah and Mitzvot and the like. So if there is an expression externally, you guys don't deserve Israel, I'm just sharing my personal interpretation within me, and as I've heard it from my rabbi, the Admor of the Ashlag Chassidut, that it is an expression of, you guys haven't yet fully earned the state of consciousness of serving God. Yisrael is Yashar Keil, of being straight to God. So because there hasn't been a full alignment and a tshuva process, therefore the world will express, you don't deserve the land because you haven't achieved that inner promised land of that state of being, of truly being in service for the other. So until we can actually come to the unconditional love between each other, as opposed to machloket, God forbid, and having debates and issues and drama amongst one another as a people, if we were to truly be a light unto the nations, then we have to be a light unto each other first and foremost, to be able to be a proper example for the world through the Torah. These are the challenges of the Bala Sulam in many of his essays. I think they ring a very strong, direct, exacting truth in terms of the work that has to be done. And it's inspiring to see you on your journey towards, being able to fulfill that work and to join the tribe and help out in this process.
Yeah, looking forward to that. That's going to be a beautiful time. But it's all good, even the bar mitzvah boy got to wait till he's 13 before he get to put on civilian and be a part of the minion. So, hey, whenever my time is, whenever God decide that time is, that's when the time is. But after that time, it's go time, baby!
Yeah, I'm with you. As someone who had his bar mitzvah at 23.
You're right. You know what I'm saying? When it's time, it's time,
Yes. Yeah, I just want to thank you again. Been a
Appreciate it.
blast. Looking forward to our continued growth, not just you and I, but everyone here and everyone who will be watching, and hopefully the whole world, to try to move away from the nonsense of falsity and inconsistency and contradiction, and come to the consistency and the groundedness and the alignment of the one and only Creator, the Creator of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And again, just to clarify, we're not seeking converts, we're just sharing and clarifying the truth that is the Torah. And I do wish that we could be able to connect to this intrinsic bliss and joy that is expressed through its means, and it is most auspiciously experienced as well with an adding of and integration of the inner dimension. For those who are not so connected, if you've had any interest or inkling of checking out any other camps or practices or thoughts of maybe they got something going on over there, whether it's listening to the calls, God forbid, of the Christian missionaries and beyond, I would challenge that your own backyard is an infinite garden of sweet depths. And if you were to dive in and explore even just a little bit, I can guarantee you that you'll see and discover much more than anything else has to offer. And I'm coming from experience, having dived into other camps as well.
And you know what? I want to add on to that as a closing comment.
Please.
The biggest promise of the Christian religion is hell or heaven. The the hardest thing for a lot of people to let go, or the hardest reason a lot of people are afraid to let go of Christianity, is because they're scared of going to hell. They're scared of the punishment that comes, or that's supposed to come. It's completely made up, but for them it's real because the book is very persuasive. So if a person has the heart to say, okay, let's say my options are, if I don't believe in Jesus and I risk going to hell, versus I risk believing in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he's telling the truth, then there is no hell in the first place. Then I hope I'm making this clear. If a person has the heart to really weigh those options out, then they'll be able to make the clear choice to say, okay, this book has a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of things that don't check out to what they claim. And if the only punishment to that is going to hell, versus this book right here is promising me that God is true and that we will dwell with him in the land of Israel, then you have a bet. And I say that because my wife and I were talking about this on Shabbat, and I didn't have this fear, and I don't know, maybe some of the people listening are Christian or not, I don't know, but what she mentioned to me is when we were studying and I was highlighting these things, she was like, well, her dilemma was hell. She's afraid of going to hell, you know, at the time, you know, and that's a real thing, because I was talking to another guy, and he was like, well, even though the Torah might be true, the Tanakh might be true, if I believe in Jesus, I have a shot at heaven. So it's these rewards that are so far off that nobody can confirm or deny. Nobody's died and told me they've been to hell, you know. Nobody's died and told me they've been to heaven. It's these things that are way far off that we can't see, feel, experience, or nothing. Versus we have this God telling us, okay, if we obey, we experience these things now in the here and now. So it's like, if a person can kind of abate and subdue that fear, if they can subdue that fear that comes with, oh, well, Jesus, Jesus, you know, if they can subdue that fear and just look and say, you know what, God is saying, you know, if I believe him, I won't be put to shame. If I trust in him, he'll keep me. If I keep his mitzvahs, he'll keep me, and he won't let me fall. He won't let me be put to shame. I won't be forsaken. I won't be left in the grave. And they have that confidence that Hashem is going to do what he says. Then I think they'll have enough courage to leave Jesus, because it takes a lot of courage to leave Jesus. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to leave Jesus. Granted, we're not looking for converts. I'm just saying, for the record.
So good for the record. Thank you for sharing. I'd like to piggyback off that with, Kabbalistically, hell, just for reference, is a refinement process. It's described as a drying machine, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
At least I've heard from modern day rabbis. It's a way for the soul to get cleaned up, to come for another bat, another run, another go. Meaning to say, the Zohar sometimes describes it as the outermost rim of the Garden of Eden, which technically means hell is part of the Garden of Eden.
Interesting.
It's part of the complete system that eventually brings everyone to the innermost point of eternal oneness with the one and only. So I think it's, all things considered, there is an opportunity for us to have a reverence and a fear of heaven. And there's also a sobering notion that, based on the principle of his desire to give goodness to creation, which is described by the Kabbalists as being the fundamental principle of creation, and that everything that it was, is, and will be is all coming from the Creator's jurisdiction, because there's nothing outside of the Creator's jurisdiction and power, and is only coming from his ultimate compassion and love, even though if it may sometimes be garmented and experienced as pain and suffering. Eno Mavado, there was only the Creator, there's only Hashem.
Fine.
So, if that's the case, then so too might be that type of refinement process, that type of difficulty, whatever a soul might have to go through, but it's ultimately out of that love and compassion for us to ultimately come to the infinitude of coming back to the ultimate oneness with the one and only. And I think that's a much more sobering, grounded, aligned, psychologically healthy, all things considered, perspective, because I think it's grounded in the truth.
So, I appreciate that. And I'm pretty sure the people listening appreciate that.